my name is Stacey Donald, and I have to share something with you that will completely change how you think about the year 2025. 3 weeks ago, doctors said I was dead for 17 minutes after a terrible accident at the clothing factory where I worked. But those 17 minutes weren't dark or quiet. They were the most real, scary, and amazing moments of my whole life. I was taken to a place beyond this world and shown things that are already starting to happen, things that will change everything we know about living, dying, and what's coming for all people. I need you to understand something right from the start. I wasn't some super religious person before this happened. I went to church on Sundays, sure, but my faith was more like a habit than something I really believed in. I worked extra shifts to take care of my 3 kids, worried about paying bills, and honestly wondered if God even cared about people like me. The idea that I would be picked to receive a message from heaven seemed impossible, but sometimes God picks the most unlikely people to bring the most important warnings. That Tuesday morning started like every other day. I was running the big sewing machine, the same one I'd worked on for 7 years. The factory was noisy, filled with the usual sounds of machines and workers calling out to each other. I remember looking at the clock and seeing it was almost lunchtime. That's when everything went terribly wrong. A huge electrical problem caused the main power line to break, sending thousands of volts through the metal frame I was leaning against. The pain hit me instantly, and it was overwhelming. Every nerve in my body screamed as the electricity went through me. I could smell burning skin and realized it was mine. The last thing I remember was hitting the concrete floor with my coworkers screaming all around me. Then everything went black, or at least that's what I thought would happen. Instead, I found myself standing in what looked like a huge field of golden light. The pain was completely gone, replaced by a peace so deep it made me cry. I looked down at my hands and they were perfect, with no marks from the electrical burns. I was wearing a simple white dress that seemed to glow with its own light. The field went on forever in all directions, and I could hear the most beautiful music, like thousands of voices singing together perfectly. That's when I saw her walking toward me. My grandmother, Elena, who had died when I was 12, she looked exactly like I remembered her, but younger somehow, glowing with health and happiness. Her smile was the same one that had made me feel better through so many childhood fears. "Mia," she said, using the special name she'd always called me, "you're not supposed to be here yet, but there's something you need to see first." Before I could ask what she meant, the golden field began to change around us. Suddenly, we were standing on what seemed like a mountaintop, looking down at the entire world spread out below us like a living map. I could see every country, every city, every person going about their daily lives, but there was something else too. Dark shadows moving across the surface of the earth, and wherever they touched, chaos followed. My grandmother pointed to different areas of the world. "Watch, Mia. See what's coming." I focused on the shadows and realized they weren't just random darkness. They were spiritual forces, evil beings of incredible power and hate. They were whispering into the ears of world leaders, feeding them thoughts of pride, fear, and revenge. I watched in horror as these whispers turned into decisions that would affect millions of lives. In one vision, I saw a man in an expensive suit signing papers while a dark figure stood behind him, its mouth pressed to his ear. The demon's words were poison, convincing him that his enemies were about to attack, that he needed to strike first to protect his country. The man's hand shook as he signed what I somehow knew was permission for nuclear weapons to be used. In another part of the world, I saw similar scenes happening. Leaders who should have been looking for peace were instead being pushed toward war by these dark influences. The demons were patient, careful, feeding on human fears and turning them into weapons of mass destruction. What scared me most was how sneaky it all was. These leaders thought they were making smart decisions, but they were actually being controlled by forces they couldn't see or understand. "This is what happens when my people stop praying," a voice said behind me. I turned to see Jesus himself standing there, and I immediately fell to my knees. His presence was both overwhelming and comforting, like standing before a gentle father who also happened to be the most powerful being in the universe. His eyes held such love and sadness that I began to cry again. "Lord," I whispered, "what can be done? How can this be stopped?" He pointed toward the world below us, and suddenly I could see something different. Points of light scattered across every continent, some bright, some dim, but all connected by golden threads that pulsed with energy. "These are my faithful ones," he said. "Every light represents someone who truly prays, who seeks my face with real faith. Their prayers are the only thing holding back complete destruction." I watched in amazement as the golden threads formed networks across the globe. Where these prayer networks were strongest, the dark shadows pulled back. Where they were weak or broken, the darkness pushed forward more aggressively. It was spiritual warfare on a scale I had never imagined, and the battlefield was the hearts and minds of humanity. Jesus showed me specific events that were already beginning to happen. I saw massive computer attacks that would shut down entire countries' systems. I watched as money systems collapsed under the weight of manipulation and greed. I witnessed natural disasters that seemed to come one after another, each one more devastating than the last. But worst of all, I saw the nuclear exchanges that would begin if things continued on the current path. "When will this happen, Lord?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Soon," he replied. "The signs are already showing up. Look at your world. The hatred between nations is growing. The threats are becoming more frequent and more serious. The spiritual atmosphere is thick with evil influence. But Stacey, this is why I'm showing you this. It doesn't have to happen." He pointed to a specific area of the prayer network, and I saw something incredible. A group of people from different churches, different backgrounds, different countries, all united in desperate prayer for peace. As they prayed, I watched one of the demons that had been whispering to a world leader suddenly pull back in pain and run away. The leader's expression changed. His hand moved away from the weapon's permission, and he picked up a phone to call for peace talks instead. "One person praying with genuine faith can change the course of history," Jesus said. "A church united in prayer can protect an entire city. A nation that truly says sorry and seeks my face can avoid judgment entirely. But the window is closing, Stacey. Time is running short." The vision shifted again, and I saw the most terrifying scene yet. Nuclear missiles launching from multiple countries at the same time. The sky lighting up with dozens of blinding flashes. Cities disappearing in seconds. Millions of people killed instantly. Millions more dying slowly from radiation poisoning. The earth itself seemed to scream in pain as civilization fell apart. "This is what will happen if my people don't wake up," Jesus said, his voice heavy with sadness. "This is what happens when they trust in their own strength instead of seeking mine. When they fight each other instead of fighting the real enemy. When they pray for their own comfort instead of praying for the world's salvation." But then he showed me something that gave me hope. I saw the same scene but different. Instead of nuclear fire, I saw world leaders coming together in humility. I saw enemies hugging as brothers. I saw weapons being taken apart and resources being used toward healing and restoration. The difference was the prayer. In this vision, the golden network of prayer had grown so strong that it completely overwhelmed the dark forces. "This is what's possible," Jesus said. "This is what will happen if enough of my people take prayer seriously. If they fast and seek my face with genuine sorrow for their sins, if they stop fighting each other and start fighting the real battle in the spiritual realm." I felt the weight of what he was showing me. The future wasn't already decided. It could go either way depending on the choices people made right now. The responsibility was overwhelming, but so was the hope. We weren't powerless victims of fate. We were spiritual warriors with the ability to change the course of history through prayer. Jesus turned to face me fully, and his eyes burned with intensity. "Stacey, you must go back and tell them. Warn them that time is short. Tell them their prayers matter more than they know. Tell them that I am ready to heal their land. But they must humble themselves and seek my face. Tell them that the enemy's plan can be stopped, but only through united prayer and genuine repentance." "But Lord," I said, "I'm nobody special. I'm just a factory worker. Who's going to listen to me?" He smiled, and warmth flooded through me. "I have always chosen the humble to confound the wise. I have always used the unexpected to accomplish my purposes. You think David was qualified to face Goliath? You think Moses was qualified to lead Israel? You think the disciples were qualified to turn the world upside down? I don't call the qualified, Stacey. I qualify the call." The vision began to fade, but Jesus wasn't finished. "There's one more thing you must understand. This battle isn't just about preventing nuclear war. It's about the eternal souls of billions of people. The enemy knows his time is short, and he's trying to take as many souls with him as possible. Every person who dies in hatred, in fear, and unforgiveness is a victory for darkness. But every person who turns to me, even in their final moments, is a victory for light." I saw it then. Behind every political conflict, behind every act of terrorism, behind every decision that pushed the world toward destruction, there was a spiritual battle raging for human souls. The demons weren't just trying to cause physical death. They were trying to ensure spiritual death eternal separation from God. Your prayers don't just prevent war, Jesus continued. They save souls, they break chains of bondage, they heal broken hearts, they restore families, they bring light into the darkest places. Never underestimate the power of prayer, Stacey. It's the most powerful force in the universe. I felt myself being pulled away from that holy place. But Jesus reached out and touched my forehead. Instantly, I felt a surge of divine power flowing through me. I'm giving you the strength to carry this message, he said. I'm giving you the words to speak and the courage to speak them. Don't be afraid of those who mock you or doubt you. I will be with you always. The last thing I saw was his face filled with such love and compassion that it's burned into my memory forever. Then I was back in my body, gasping for air in the hospital emergency room. The doctors were amazed. I had been clinically dead for 17 minutes with no brain activity, no heartbeat, no breathing. By all medical standards, I should have been brain dead or suffered severe brain damage. Instead, I was perfectly fine, more alive than I'd ever been. The burns on my body had healed to a degree that confused the medical staff. What should have required months of recovery and multiple surgeries was already showing signs of miraculous healing. But more importantly, I was different inside. The fear that had controlled my life was gone, replaced by an unshakable faith and a burning urgency to share what I had seen. When I tried to explain my experience to the doctors, some listened politely, while others dismissed it as hallucinations caused by lack of oxygen. But I knew what I had experienced was more real than anything in this physical world. I had been given a mission and I was going to fulfill it no matter what people thought of me. The first person I told was my oldest daughter, Carmen. She's a nurse herself, practical and logical, not easily convinced by emotional appeals. When I described my vision, she sat in stunned silence for a long time. Finally, she said, "Mom, I've never seen you like this. There's something different about you. Your whole face has changed." She was right. I felt different. The constant anxiety that had bothered me for years was gone. The anger I'd carried toward people who had hurt me had disappeared. Even my relationship with my ex-husband, which had been bitter for over a decade, was transformed. I found myself praying for him instead of resenting him. But more than personal change, I felt the weight of the message I'd been given. I started reaching out to pastors, to prayer groups, to anyone who would listen. Some embraced the message immediately and began organizing prayer meetings. Others were skeptical, asking for proof or signs. I reminded them that Jesus himself said that a wicked generation seeks after signs, but the only sign they would receive was the sign of Jonah. What amazed me was how quickly the message spread. Within days, I was receiving messages from people across the country who had heard about my experience. Many shared their own stories of prophetic dreams, visions, and spiritual encounters that confirmed what I had seen. It became clear that God was speaking to many people, not just me. I started noticing changes in world events that lined up exactly with what I had been shown. Tensions between nuclear powers got worse almost daily. Computer attacks became more frequent and sophisticated. Economic instability spread across the globe. But I also saw the other side. Prayer meetings were springing up everywhere. People who had never prayed before were falling to their knees in desperation. Churches that had been divided for decades were coming together in unity. The most powerful moment came when I was invited to speak at a gathering of religious leaders from different denominations. Catholics, Protestants, Orthodox Christians, all putting aside their differences to pray for peace. As I shared my vision, I watched grown men weep. By the end of the evening, they had committed to organizing continuous prayer coverage, with different groups taking shifts to ensure that prayer was ascending to heaven 24 hours a day. But I also encountered resistance. Some people accused me of being mentally unstable, of making up the story for attention. Others said I was being deceived by demons pretending to be angels of light. There were moments when the criticism was so intense that I wondered if I should just keep quiet and go back to my normal life. That's when I remembered Jesus' words about being mocked and doubted. He had prepared me for this, and whenever I felt discouraged, I would remember the vision of those nuclear missiles, the millions of people who would die if we didn't act. That kept me going when everything else wanted to stop. The most encouraging responses came from people who had been praying for years, feeling like their prayers weren't making a difference. When they heard my testimony about the golden network of prayer, about how every prayer matters and has power, they were reinvigorated. Prayer meetings that had been struggling to attract a handful of people suddenly had hundreds attending. I also noticed something else. As more people began praying seriously, I started having dreams about specific world leaders. I would see them in their private moments wrestling with difficult decisions, and I would know exactly how to pray for them. Sometimes I would dream about a leader being tormented by dark whispers, and I would wake up and immediately begin praying for God to send angels to protect their mind and heart. The results were remarkable. Several times I watched news reports of leaders who had been on the brink of making catastrophic decisions, suddenly changing course. A military strike would be called off at the last minute. A diplomatic solution would be found to a seemingly impossible conflict. Each time I knew it was the result of prayer, of spiritual warfare being fought in the heavenly realm. But the vision also showed me that time was running out. The dark forces weren't giving up. They were adapting, finding new ways to influence world events. The prayer network had to grow stronger and more coordinated. It wasn't enough for individual churches or denominations to pray in isolation. There had to be unity, cooperation, and a shared understanding of what was at stake. That's why I'm sharing this message with you today. Not because I want attention or fame, but because I've seen what's coming if we don't act. I've seen the nuclear fire that will consume cities. I've seen the chaos that will follow. I've seen the millions who will die, not just physically but spiritually, separated from God for eternity. But I've also seen the hope. I've seen what happens when God's people unite in prayer. I've seen demons flee in terror when faced with genuine faith. I've seen world leaders transformed by the power of intercessory prayer. I've seen the golden network of prayer pushing back the darkness and bringing light to the world. The vision I was shown wasn't set in stone. It was a warning, a call to action, an invitation to participate in changing the course of history. But the window of opportunity won't stay open forever. The spiritual forces of darkness are working around the clock to bring about destruction. We must work just as diligently to bring about peace. I'm not asking you to take my word for it. I'm asking you to pray and seek God's face for yourself. Fast and ask Him to show you the spiritual reality behind world events. Join with others in united prayer for peace. Put aside denominational differences and focus on what unites us. The enemy wants us divided because he knows that united we're unstoppable. The message I was given is simple but urgent. Time is short, but hope remains. Prayer works, but it requires faith, persistence, and unity. The future of our world depends not on politicians or military leaders, but on ordinary people who are willing to get on their knees and cry out to God for mercy. I've delivered the message I was given. Now it's up to you to decide what to do with it. Will you join the golden network of prayer that's holding back destruction? Will you fast and seek God's face for your nation? Will you put aside your differences and unite with others in spiritual warfare? The choice is yours, but choose quickly. The darkness is advancing, but the light is still shining. And in God's hands, even the smallest light can push back the greatest darkness. The question is, will you be part of that light?